way. A very huge and warm welcome back to everybody for week 11, not just double figures, but from 10 into 11. Week 11 of the Survive to Thrive webinar from the Export Recovery Panel. This is, if you've been following us, a journey that we're taking together through COVID and beyond to try to find a path to recovery and sustainable happiness for us all, for our businesses, for our communities, and for our country and fire. It's a pleasure to be back with you all in a very rainy Auckland, I'm sad to say. I'm Andy Mitchell, and not in Wellington is Hamish Conway, who has eloped off somewhere. He's got an excuse why he can't be here, and in his place is a very bearded Christopher Boyce. Christopher, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome all. Shall we get into introductions, Andy, then into the poll?
I think we'll do a poll first. It's like what we want to do. It's like what Hamish / Chris is going to do right now. It's just launch a very quick poll for you to answer. We just want to get a feeling. So today we're on a deep dive. We want to get a feeling of what your engagement is with the sector. So up there on your screens, you'll see a very quick poll, if you just want to give us an answer to that, and we'll announce the poll in a second. In the meantime, when you're pressing the right keys, wherever you are in the country today, a little bit of background about what we've been doing. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been deep diving into individual sectors, and today I'm delighted to say that we are focusing on the health, wellness and beauty sector, because it's a sector which has been hugely impacted by the changes in consumer behaviour and logistics of the COVID crisis, as we've learned as we've gone around the world in the past few weeks. So today we've assembled a most amazing panel of experts to share what's been going on in their worlds in real time. So hopefully we can take some huge learnings away from what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, I am going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to turn to my right on my screen and say good morning to Samantha Gray. Sam, good morning.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me on board. I'm the Managing Director of BioEquitas, which is a consultancy company that helps natural health products companies get their products to market. We work in the dietary supplement, nutraceutical and functional food, also cosmetics and skincare and animal health. And we help with hands-on product development from concept to commercialization, and a lot of regulatory advice, including, which I think is really important for this particular forum, regulatory strategy that should sit alongside every other strategy that you have in place. And we do other things such as technical troubleshooting and R&D. Kind of jack of all trades, I guess. Yeah.
That's I'm going to turn to Eugene. Now, good morning, Eugene, all the way from Seoul in South Korea. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's early morning, early start for me, but I'm really delighted and thankful for having me here. I am. Yeah, I'm the head of business development in NZTE, South Korea. And I've been working here about 2-3 years now. And in my past life, I worked in FMCG companies like Hershey's, Coca-Cola, and other cosmetic companies like LG, H&H. So hopefully I can add some consumer insights to our audience here today.
Oh, you certainly can. It's amazing to have a voice straight from the markets, and thank you for joining us really genuinely first thing in your morning today. It's much appreciated by ourselves and by the audience. Who's next? Paul Pritchard, you're in the middle of my screen, looking like you're ready for a party. Welcome back. This is your second time on the panel.
I feel very lucky to have been invited back. Obviously, I must have said something worthwhile last time. So I'm Paul. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Overdose Digital. Overdose is a global commerce accelerator. That's what we call ourselves. We help merchants trade online with a growth mindset. So we build out tech, we help trade sites, and then we help market those products and services on a global scale.
Oh, it's great to have you back, Paul. Welcome. Now, who's next? Julie. Julie, good morning. Welcome.
Hello, how are you? I'm Julie Curphey. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Bliss Technologies. We make probiotics. oral targeted probiotics and export them, our finished goods, to many markets, but the US in particular. So that's probably why I'm here today.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And who's next? Chloe, good morning. How are you?
Morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Very well.
So I am general manager from Moas Arc. It's a new group of company, but we own lots of New Zealand brands such as Oasis Beauty, Plante, Oxygens. So we mainly focus on we own New Zealand health care brand and skincare brand, and we export to USA and mainly China. So I will share about more China exporting issue today.
That's going to be hugely valuable. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel today. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Angus Brown, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Andy. So I just had to unmute I thought the spacebar worked, but it wasn't working. Thanks very much, Andy. So Angus Brown here from Arepa. We're a brain food technology company. We focus on clinically proven smart drinks and food products to help your brain. So we sell within New Zealand, and we're just starting to export around a number of different markets.
It's great. Thank you, Angus, for joining, and it's great to have such a good panel. I want to say Hamish, but Chris, over to you for a second. What was the result of that little poll that we took? Who have we got out in the audience?
Fascinating result just coming up on everyone's screen right now. We've got 55% that are exporting in the next 6 months, and 32% are not. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation today around for those people that are not exporting, what they can learn from the panel, but also the people that are exporting. It's going to be some fascinating insights to what everyone else is experiencing at the moment.
And just before we dip into things, Chris, I mean, like you've been nose to the grindstone all week in the export sector. What's the sentiments out there at the moment?
I think it's very similar to the polls we've been receiving over the last 4 weeks. There's some positiveness there. There's also, I think there's a little bit of risk coming towards us, especially from the markets, and consumers have been buying an awful lot, and I think we need to be very observant around that they may be retrenching. And in certain markets like the US, got some very interesting political change happening. China, interesting to see what's happening in China at the moment. So there's a bit of optimism there, but there's also, I think, we need to be treated with a bit of caution.
Yeah, it's like, and that's really the topic of today. I'm going to turn to you first, Sam, if I can. This like the optimism's been growing in our polls week by week here, but we know that what's been happening in this sector is indeed a double-edged sword. What's like from a high level here? What's the outlook for the health, wellness, and beauty sector at the present moment? Who've been the winners and why?
Well, I think the health and wellness market is going to be the winner because increasingly consumers are, in some cases, desperate for something to keep them healthy, and there is also a consumer perception that they want to grasp onto anything that they think that could be directly useful regards COVID, and I guess that's something we'll get to later on. Yeah. But overall, the health and wellness sector is experiencing growth right now, and I do think that will continue on, but there may well also be a sort of a panic peak, which then may drop off.
So there is some underlying concerns underneath the optimism. Like Julie, in a broader sense, like we understand that there's been a huge impact by the loss of the domestic market for manufacturers in this sector. Is this causing trouble and additional competition inside export because of the loss of this market here?
I think we've had some issues, as potentially many of the panelists have, of being able to export in a very quick way. There's been some real delays and some problem, and so certainly our US business has suffered because we haven't been able to get enough stock up there. I think, but the other thing on that is that yes, while consumers are looking for something, anything that can potentially help the health or wellness, and particularly the very broad scope of immunity, people might go, well, there's a massive opportunity, let's get in there really quickly. I would say it is not quick right now. So while sometimes we're really well placed in New Zealand to take advantage of and use our innovation and move quickly because we're small and agile and nimble and all those things, right now it is not particularly fast. So I would put that out there early to say, if you want to do something in the next 3 months, it might take 6.
So we have, this is the picture, we have an amount of desperation from consumers that's resulting in increased demand across lots of functional products here, but our ability to service that demand is quite impacted. Angus, I know that you're back to another round of capital raising over in the US. What's the sentiments from the investor community at the present moment?
It depends who you speak to and depends how well you pitch. But a lot of them still are reasonably bullish. A lot of them that we've been speaking to are in the, they're really bullish about consumer products, especially in the health and wellness space. And, they're seeing the rise of a number of different case studies and the success of online and Amazon not only help with delivering better margin to those companies, but also they can track the success of what's really worked. So from our perspective, there's definitely a lot of interest, and we're at the early stages of courting various food and beverage VC funds that are the US based. But what we're realizing as a small, nimble, fast Kiwi company, like Julie kind of brought up, these guys take a little bit longer to pull the trigger, and their due diligence process is a little bit longer. So I guess the key thing to be cognizant on is look at your cash burn and see when your runway runs out, and if you can look to extend that out by making some smart changes, looking at your cash flow, but then also turning to your existing shareholders to see whether they can prop you up until that time comes when you bring on that bigger US money.
Yeah, so we know that there've been some issues that have really, stretched out the time frame for getting anything into markets in any part of commercialization. And lots of this has actually been quite functional. Lots of the conversations we've had over the past few weeks have been about broken supply chains. Paul, I think when you were last on, we were talking about some real issues with last mile delivery for direct to consumer off platforms, and even issues getting into major DCs on the platforms and the things. In terms of like the high level recovery of the logistic infrastructure for those platforms, is there a reason to be cheerful at the moment?
I think if you were a brand that has managed to trade through the last 3 months, then you'll be, and in particular, if you're a pure play online player, you'll be very, very happy. We've seen, a lot of our merchants have seen online growth, 10 times to 100 times their previous periods. And that's exciting and pretty addictive, but it's also pretty scary. And I think the challenges that are falling out of that are twofold. One is the ability to supply product, so to receive product in and then send it out. And then the second thing is the perception of sustainability of that type of growth, right? The platforms themselves have been holding up very, very well, but we've also seen some really interesting moves from, particularly in the health and wellness space, right, which is a really hot thing right now, given the global pandemic. And the way that New Zealand has dealt with that has also put brand New Zealand on that global stage as well, right? So if you're a Kiwi brand that's exporting out to places like the US and Europe and up into Asia, or just a local brand here, people are desperate for that panacea, right? That ability to kind of protect yourself. The challenge is, and we spoke about this earlier with Sam and Julie, was people are looking for anything, right? Any answer. And if you're a supplier in that space, you're making bank off the back of that, right? But do you know who is buying and why, right? And that's kind of the biggest challenge going forward, is your consumer base is shifting. Are you going to be able to meet those ongoing demands? Is the volume of sales going to continue for that? How are you going to start to do your demand planning off the back of that, I think?
Right. So this is certainly leading to some interesting commercial challenges with the spike of demands. From South Korea today, Eugene. Is this spike in demand for products that support us, protect us, whatever we want to say, inside wellness? Is that seen through in your market? What are you experiencing?
Yes, yeah, definitely. We've seen a huge surge in sales for health functional supplements, including propolis, probiotics, and vitamins, etc. As other panelists were saying about, they're looking for anything to really protect themselves and boost their immunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, in Korea as well, yeah, consumers are really looking for products to really strengthen themselves to fight against that pandemic. We don't really have the vaccine for it, right? So yeah, that has been shown.
Okay, so around this demand, there must have been some identifiable shift in consumer trust with products or with consumer needs. Julie, what are your experiences with that at the moment? What's changed in consumer behaviour?
I think so. A common theme that we're talking about is consumer demand changing, and I think people are assuming that if they can, I think they're looking for anything that they can do to support their own health and well-being, and that absolutely comes down to immunity. Like, that's the word, if you like, that people possibly are looking for, because when we're talking about protecting ourselves from a disease, generally people kind of go, well, that's about my immunity, right? If I've got good, strong immunity, I'm going to be able to protect myself from diseases. Which is true in part, but obviously it's a lot more complex than actually that. And so I think in times of change and rapid change and big change that the whole globe is going through, people look to see what they can do to help themselves. And so they're looking for anything that is going to help them boost their immunity or keep them well. And so that then, for products that have some immune boosting properties, there's been a massive surge in those products.
Yeah.
But it's also brought in some brands or some products that are taking advantage of that and potentially putting messages out there that are not true or compliant, and that becomes really important not only in New Zealand, because if you there's been a lot of news in the last couple of weeks about the Advertising Standards Authority and the action that they're taking, certainly against New Zealand brands, but also the regulatory, compliance bodies in the US and other markets where they're really cracking down. And so it becomes, I think that the next problem becomes the consumers are looking for something that's going to save them, and that puts a lot of pressure on your product, because a dietary supplement or a vitamin or mineral probiotic, whatever, can't do everything. Like, you know what I mean? So they're looking for something, okay, if I just take this, I'm absolutely immune to everything. Of course you're not. And so then not only do we talk about demand, we've got all this product, no one left to buy it, or, we've gone through the COVID thing now, so no one's continuing to take them, or they're taking the brand and they've gone, well, that didn't really help me. And you get a negative brand perception at the other side. So I think that's something we're all going to have to look out for as well.
You've raised a really interesting point. I mean, this is plainly leading towards the erosion of trust, potentially, if we handle it wrong. And I want to touch in some more detail on the regulatory challenges that brings later on. Just when we're trying to understand the change in consumer demands, I mean, like plainly, Chloe, in China, wellness and immunity is they've been for a long time a central driver for consumer purchase. What have you seen changing in the needs of Chinese consumers during this crisis as it unfolds in that market?
I think during the whole COVID-19, all the brands from the whole around the world, they are start making cleaning product. So it's really unusual. So you can see lots of brands, they never make cleaning product or hand sanitizer, and then they suddenly start making hand sanitizer. And from the record in China right now, have 20,000 millions overstock hand sanitizer in China. So I mean, don't make hand sanitizer just you think COVID-19 is coming. Yeah. And because of that, everyone start making hand sanitizer. So the shortage of the surfactant and the alcohol is coming happen right now. So for us to making cleaning product in New Zealand, right now it's the cost of goods, it's increased about 25%. And when we purchase surfactant price is increased by 48%. And the alcohol, the raw material, is increased 78%. So we need to play carefully when you think, oh, there's an opportunity, but turns out your cost of goods increase by maybe 50%, and you can't even sell out because there's too much stock in China, and China is making tons of the product and cheaper than New Zealand, and the export to Europe and the USA. So I think that we need to change our mindset and how to play the game wisely. So that's what I think we need to focus on different products, and we need to aware of the raw material actually is shortage happen around the world.
This is really interesting. So it's like our assumptions walking into today was that the supply chain issues are what we've been talking about for the last few weeks, which about, you know, not enough air freights, not enough capacity, freight prices going up in terms of New Zealand to the world. But what we're hearing here is that actually it's constraints on inbound supply are as bad as well. Just an open question, perhaps for Julie or Samantha, is this reflected in your experience at the moment? Do we have problems?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, in New Zealand, for better or for worse, a lot of the ingredients used to manufacture natural health products are imported, and so there is a lot of pressure there because of the freight capacity, and so there are delays in the supply of raw materials, which then impacts manufacture, and then if the cost of air freighting has gone up between 5 and 25 times, I've been told. So that is a real impact, and what Chloe was talking about there is really important. And I think when companies are looking to capture the trends that are happening right now, the ability to be able to pivot if things don't pan out the way that you think they will is really, really important. And this is why having and in line with what Julie was talking about the claims that people want to make about their products, ensuring that those are legitimate and that they're backed up by evidence, and also having a regulatory strategy that works alongside your overall strategy so that you can develop your products in a way that allows you to pivot. So if one market that you thought was going to be fantastic all of a sudden shuts down for whatever reason, demand or some other reason, then you can take that product and put it into another market is I think a really smart way to manage this. But this does require a lot of consideration at the back end, because manufacture, the regulatory compliance of manufacture for different countries is quite different. So you can end up with a warehouse full of product that you thought you were going to be able to sell in one country and you can't, and then actually you can't sell it in another country because of the way it was made or the compliance to which it was made with, or the ingredients in it even. And so planning at the early stage, I think right now, to ensure that your products, that you have a risk management strategy to pivot and building that into your manufacture and product design at the beginning is really important.
This plainly introduces a whole new level of complexity in terms of just basic commercial planning. Actually, what are we making, who for, and where are we going to sell it? Identifying the market. There's a new agility needed. Paul, from your perspective, I mean, this must mean that people are looking to commercialize new markets, but without really being clear on where to go. How are you guiding people across platforms at the moment?
Well, I think, we're in really unprecedented times here, right? We've got traditional economic model of, over demand and under supply, right? Which is kind of changing the way that we can market and, we can sell products. You've got lots of dynamic pricing changes that are going on. And in that environment, what's happening is that demand is now coming at a lot of merchants from many, many different places.
Yeah.
And particularly when you're talking about products that are heavily regulated in various parts of the world, when you have the Kiwi attitude of move fast and, get shit done, basically, when you're trying to enter into markets like the US or China or, places in Europe where and Angus talked about it, right? When your runway of cash, is limited based on your worldview from New Zealand,
yeah,
we're now entering a new kind of place where the unknown is just completely out there, right?
Yeah.
The things that you used to be able to do really quickly in terms of understanding your regulations, the way to enter markets, the supply channels, the platforms that you sell on, they're all changing rapidly, Eugene Chloe mentioned hand sanitizer, right? There's been an overabundance of manufacturers pushing into making hand sanitizer. That's changed the pricing model of it. That's kind of changed the ability to supply original product. It's also meant that the platforms are starting to look at things that they never looked at before, things like price gouging, right? So you have platforms like Shopify looking directly at the products you list on that platform and checking whether or not you are using kind of this new demand to change the pricing model of other products, right? And then removing specific products off your store, which is, 4 months ago, that's crazy. That would never happen. But now that's the model that's happening. Facebook is blocking, nearly every single ad that we put out there for health and wellness products because of the claims that are going out there that, 4 months ago weren't an issue. So this new world is going to be navigated, and it won't be navigated at pace. And I think you've got to have a kind of risk-adverse approach first, and you have to have really, really strong contacts, right? New Zealand, as I said before, brand New Zealand is hot right now, super, super hot, right? And we should be able to leverage that. We just need to find ways to be able to do that in safe and risk-adverse ways.
Yeah, I think I'd love your reflection, Eugene, on this, please, in terms of the perception of and the advantage of brands in New Zealand in health and wellness at the moment. Has the perception demonstrably changed over the past 2 or 3 months? Or are we seeing a new trend that we have to be aware of?
Well, I think the pandemic has expedited some of the trends that has already been happening. For example, there was pollution in Korea from before, so people were looking for products to really cleanse themselves and maybe pure ingredients and with less additives, etc., etc. But with the pandemic coming, consumers are even more aware, and they would like to go back to the basics. I mean, there has been applications on mobile to really go through the ingredients that's harmful for skin and consumers, but they are even more concerned and even more aware. So, products from New Zealand, of course, has purest ingredients, and it's with all the best ingredients to really appeal to consumers, and with naturalness and back to basic sort of a trend really is good for New Zealand, I believe. And trends such as like vegan cosmetics and things like that is emerging. Consumers are really looking for the best and natural quality.
Yeah, and New Zealand's still the place that's associated with that best and natural quality. Now, one shift that we have been talking about recently an awful lot in this, that underpinned by this change in demand, is the huge shift from bricks and mortar into online. Angus, you've been on a bit of a roller coaster, haven't you, with Arepa in that space with some pretty significant growth. What's the story behind that?
Basically lockdown happening and then retail stopping for us. So we had to seriously pivot and sell where the sun was shining. And we realized that we had a lifeline, which was our online store. And we focused a lot on, essentially during lockdown, on just really getting granular right through from educating the customer with different email flows, turning them and converting them from a one-off small-time customer to a high value, long-term subscriber, spending a lot of time on customer care and seeing people who were kind of freaking out because of the virus jumping off their subscriptions, and then we would kind of email them or connect with them and say, hey, you know, we can, instead of cancelling, why don't we just push it out a bit or delay it and just maintain that subscriber base, and then actually double down on Facebook advertising, because we were able to, because some players were unfortunately not able to sell, there was we were able to get better bang for our buck on digital advertising and a greater share of voice during the lockdown. And so we and then just clever, you know, focusing on, you know, email marketing, which is essentially free, and growing our email database, and email marketing we think is certainly something to keep focusing on and growing. It can generate, you know, a good amount of revenue. And yeah, for us, we obviously lost, you know, 60% of our retail sales during the lockdown, but we were able to grow our online store, you know, 150% month on month, just by focusing, you know, entirely on that place. And it's got us to a much better position. And we're probably, you know, fast forwarding ourselves another 6 months or so to where we thought we were going to be. Obviously, everyone was buying online because that was the only place, and they didn't want to leave their homes. And so it's for us now is managing that dip as some transfer back into retail and maintaining growth. But we definitely know that the buttons to work. And then the other thing is just, you know, A/B testing a lot of different ads and content out there, and then seeing which ones work and really doubling down on the ones that work and pulling the ones that are not working off, and just having someone that really knows SEO and Facebook performance marketing. Obviously, Paul and the guys at Overdose would know that like the back of their hands. But I think, yeah, you can get quite granular, and there's a lot of rich data out there, especially if you're using things like Shopify and Google Analytics to understand the current barometer of your company from an online sales point of view.
Yeah, so there's a huge amount of learnings for everybody as the marketing space gets tighter, as Paul said before. Chloe, going into like your business going into China and maybe plainly a different set of platforms, has there been the same shift towards reliance on those direct-to-consumer channels? Or what have you experienced?
We have two different models. One is through general trade, so we can just see freight and go to the China, and we go through the traditional offline distribution channel. And then secondly, we through Daigou. So Daigou, it means we send mail direct from New Zealand to China. And because of the air freight is going up so much, before one kg is $4. Right now, 1 kg is about $8 to $9. So, but we have, of course, we charge the end consumer for the freight.
Yeah.
But I think all the consumers, they understand and they have the demand and they trust New Zealand product. That's why they're willing to pay the high freight, the cost to China. And because of the increase of the air freight, of course, we decrease quite a lot of the opportunity mail direct to China. So the sales definitely going down, but we hopefully the air freight will coming down and we can get back to normal. But we are recently, what we do is we do everything through general trade, and we choose the product and do general trade, and we see freight to China that us to go through the COVID-19.
You seem to be describing something here, Chloe, which is almost a critical risk. If those prices don't come down, a major market like China could actually become inaccessible to us. Is that a reality?
Yeah, I think that's a reality. And I think the problem is how can New Zealand brand can find our own strengths to face those Chinese brand in a Chinese market.
Yeah.
So at this stage, if we can have more support from government or to control the freight or control the supply chain, for example, the more raw material and all the supply chain issue, then I think we can get through all the problem. Yeah.
Right. Okay. There's more support is needed.
Yeah.
Christopher.
Andy.
Oh, your finger, man. That was good.
Do you want to jump in here for a moment? To all the panelists and attendees, please do jump into the Q&A. If there's any light bulb moments or questions you've got from the panelists or for the panelists or subject matters you'd like to talk about, please pop it in the Q&A and we'll ask those at about 10 to 11.
Splendid. I'd like to thank you, Chris. I'd like to just turn to Julie for a second again, if I may. I'm in, like, your world is prebiotics. So the differentiation that Chloe was talking about there for you in your world is differentiation by function, and yet we have this regulatory problem that's perhaps getting worse. What's your experience at the moment, and how are you managing to trade through this when you're reliant on people having their own interpretation of what immunity support actually is?
Yeah, good question. So I think certainly in New Zealand and reflective also in the US, as I said, that so if you've been making claims about immunity in a compliant way, because we can say in different ways in New Zealand and the US, so we can't just put our New Zealand product on a US shelf and say exactly the same thing because the law is different. But we can talk about immunity support and support for the immune defences, like the wording is quite specific. But certainly in the last 3 months in New Zealand, that has become sharper because people have been talking about immunity and immune defences, and they're quite different things. And so the bodies in New Zealand have come out and said, okay, there is now a clear difference between the word immunity and saying support immunity. And so they've been very clear on that in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And the US is the same, because there's a lot of products, as I said, now talking about immunity when they didn't before. And people not understanding really what that is. And people are also going, brands are going as far to say immunity against viruses or immunity against the virus, which is clearly unfounded. Even if my product did have data against the virus, we'd never be allowed to say it, because we're not a medicine, we're a dietary supplement. And so consumers get very, very confused and they make complaints, and you don't want that, because now is the time where the authorities are absolutely cracking down. And that gets publicised. It's not under a carpet. It's out there. So then your brand, you're losing just trust and credibility and authenticity, all of the things that you work years to build up.
This is a tightrope, though, isn't it? I mean, like Paul, like you were describing before, that the change in the platforms and their policing, and this is like what Julie's just described plainly is creating fear on the platforms that legally they can't afford to get it wrong. But so Sam was saying before that regulations are changing. It's like, how do we deal with this? It's like, have you got any tips about how to make sure that you don't overstep the line? Is this about doing less or about changing the way that we work or label? Where do we start?
I guess our first piece of advice to the merchants we work with is control what you can control, right? Angus talked about it really, really well, right? When your routes disappear and your regulatory bodies come in hard, go back to what you can control, right? Go back to the spaces you can play in and do that very, very well. Because out the back of, and I'm sure, Angus would echo this, what you learn through going back to that stuff and adapting it and evolving it, running kind of great email marketing, being able to translate the data that you gather through that into kind of your outbound paid advertising, looking at your platform's analytics, the sales reports that come out of your Shopify's or your Magentos or whatever, using that stuff to really start to inform how your customers are shopping with you, and then, being more relevant to that shopping behavior. I think that's where you start, right? Because you can't fight against something that you don't know and you can't see.
Yeah.
So start where you can control. The second part is, you have to have your mind in two places, right? One is how do you sustain your business and how do you keep selling? Mm-hmm. And the second part is what's around the corner. So you either need strong advice and partnerships and, places like NZTE and, export advice and, people like Sam, can really help you start to understand the markets that you're looking at as well. So seek it, right? There's often lots and lots of kind of free initial advice that will help you kind of I guess, narrow down your field of where you need to go. So yeah, but our best advice is control what you can control first.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. It's like on the point of control is critical. But Sam, this is like the control you need, though, from a regulatory point of view, is not just about labeling, is it? This is about product formulation. This is about manufacturing. They're almost taking it right back from the edge of the market back to the heart of our business. What should we be doing differently when we're seeing regulations changing and we need to be agile in how we apply regulations for different markets? Do we see a different business model required for most of us? What's on the horizon?
Well, my summary to that is that if you're playing in a highly regulated market, which natural health is, whether people want to like that concept or not, it is a highly regulated market, both foods and dietary supplement type products, which are called different things in different jurisdictions, but let's call them dietary supplements. So the key is to have a regulatory strategy sitting alongside the rest of your strategic plan. But if I can just build on what Julie was talking about there with the claims and so forth, and what Andrew was saying, the regulations themselves, particularly if you look at the US, have not changed, but the intensity with which the FDA are interested in ensuring that they are being enforced is what is changing. And if we look back to a sort of a year ago, when in the dietary supplement space, CBD, these cannabinoid products, which are dietary supplements in the US, were the subject of intense focus from the FDA, and the FDA issued a variety of letters to companies whose manufacture and or labeling was not compliant. And these letters become public knowledge. So they're published on the FDA website, they sit there forever, and the damage to your brand, that you've got to take that risk if you don't want to comply. And so from my thought process is that with immunity being so hot and some brands internationally and maybe locally not complying, the FDA's focus may switch to immunity, and they may take a close look at products that make an immunity claim, and then they may look at both the labeling and then also the manufacture of those. And even though the FDA, who were planning to come down and do some auditing of some manufacturers here in the dietary supplement space, can't come right now, they have indicated that they may request a paper audit of documentation and things like that. So that's why it's really important, if you want to be compliant, that you find out how to do that and put things in place so that you are.
So this is what I'm hearing, Sam, is that this is just about having a really clear regulatory strategy up front, and to expect the organizations like the FDA to want to zoom in deeper onto any part of the market that is actually taking off. As soon as something comes, they will go deep and they will go hard. Yes,
and it's not just about the regulatory pathway for the US. If you have a good regulatory strategy, it allows you to be nimble and pivot to take your product somewhere else if your plans don't pan out. Because it's one thing to have products sitting in a warehouse that has a label that's not compliant. You can relabel, you can repack, but you can't remanufacture.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Angus, I'd love your reflection on that, because plainly your products are underpinned, they live within tight regulations and underpinned by science as well. How do you approach that regulatory matters inside your organization, given how fast your ambition is to scale?
Yeah, we first and foremost, we engage with some expert advice, working with the likes of Samantha and other lawyers to help us identify the framework in which we should be operating. And then it's also looking at, because we want to also tell the story of the science, and sometimes that's really quite hard because you're essentially making a claim. So what are some of the more innovative ways that you can get that message across the consumer without breaking any rules? So I guess it depends on where the what I guess aspect of your entire business is engaging with the customer. So with respect to like the finished beverage, for example, on the shelf, so that needs to really have the most rigor around it in terms of what you're saying to the consumer. And then going back a step, your website needs to be really above board, and then your social media, and then anything, and then your emails. But I guess we're finding that we probably have more freedom to tell a deeper story around the science in our email messages, and we can explain more and reference links. And I guess the key thing for us is, we are trying to operate. We do push the boundaries sometimes because we're a pretty new product within an older infrastructure, and we're trying to prove something new. But I guess the thing boils back to your values. And so our values are like integrity and being true to the science. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that we have, enough references to quash or to keep calm anyone from a scientific background that would ever question us, and also be true to what we're actually marketing in terms of what it can actually do on our packaging and on our website. It is a really fine line to dance. And as a smaller startup, we're probably a little bit more bullish on what we're doing and saying, and probably we might get a slap on the hand in time to come. But we kind of need to take those risks to see, what we can and can't say. But I think the core thing, to pull us back though, is working with the likes of Samantha at Bioequitas and a few of our other consultants, just to ensure that we have a level of protection, not only in this market, but as we enter into new markets. And we know those regulations, especially in the likes of the US, they're so litigious. So we not only need to comply, but we also need to look at how we can protect ourselves from anyone wanting to come at us for a particular claim as well. So it's a new space, and we're learning daily, and we're also testing what works and what doesn't from a high level marketing, looser marketing claim versus a hardcore scientific claim. You can do a self-substantiated health claim on your food product, but it requires a massive dossier of scientific evidence. And what a consultant was saying, that a lot of the companies that have gone down the path of doing a self-substantiated health claim to get, kiwi fruit is good for digestion on the front of your pack, for $150,000 of investment plus, to do a full self-substantiated health claim, versus spending that $150,000 on marketing and doing a looser level marketing claim. 9 times out of 10, it's the looser level marketing guys that are reaping more benefits than the hardcore science. So there's a pro and con to a lot of this, and we're just we're waiting and watching. We would ideally love to spend millions on science and claims, but we're a small, startup with limited cash, so we have to really focus on growth and sales at the same time.
Yeah, so it's a difficult balance to tread. And Paul, just a quick reflection from you on that situation, because plainly you see this from multiple products and categories coming through. Is it a time to go to marketing claims rather than deep claims?
Oh, absolutely. I think Angus touched on it really well. By going into the platforms and putting out these looser marketing claims, we actually have, you get a really rapid response from platforms. So if you're advertising via Facebook, for example, and something gets rejected, it gets rejected really quickly, but you also have a very quick opportunity to change it, right? And so you have this kind of backwards and forwards with the platforms that allow you to kind of say certain things and not say other things. And it helps guide you towards what you can and can't say, but it happens really quickly. And so I think the ones that are going out there and to Angus's point, trying that kind of looser approach to statements, if they learn faster what they can say and not, right? Rather than, investing that heavy amount of money up front to try and substantiate something through science. The brands that are winning now are the ones that are able to rapidly, change tact with the way that they operate, right? If you've got a a trade route that, you rely on heavily, and direct to consumers, a small percentage of that total sales, to be able to flip into that and actually start to get out and market and build data around your product. It's a really powerful way of adapting, I think.
Yeah, that adaptation is a theme that's come throughout all the conversations today. Hamish / Chris, I'm looking at the clock here, we're almost at the top of the hour, so I'd love to get some questions in a second. Just before I do, I want to touch on the after party that's happening after 11 o'clock. If you've been with us for the past weeks, you'll know it's the best party in town. It's the only place to be. I'll tell you. Champagne's ready, it's on ice. And what we do after 11 o'clock is that we invite anybody who wants to stay with the panelists who can manage another half hour with us, and to be able to talk to the other attendees and to ask some more questions in an informal setting. So if you can stretch your diaries to stay with us until 11:30, that would be grand. But as ever, all the richest cuts coming out of the conversation today will be out on social media for you all throughout this week as well. Just before we turn to some questions here, so it's been mentioned today that we're moving into a time that we have to market differently to consumers. But as exporters, then actually accessing our in-market partners and influencing people and validating is a big part of our job. When we can't jump on a plane and go to trade shows, it's like the world's up to world's in. What do we do, and how do we manage? Eugene, it's like what's coming up to replace the power of the trade shows and the need for face-to-face contact, especially in markets like South Korea, where relationships drive business. How do we approach this in the coming months?
What they call untagged media or untagged marketing is in place at the moment, which means consumers don't want to be in contact with another person because of this COVID-19, right? So what's happening is not only the growth of e-commerce, but also about the growth of like video commerce, live commerce, etc., where the influencers are in contact with the consumer both ways when they are selling products online or via video. So those actually is very beneficial for even smaller businesses, because having those influencers is something that's fraction of the price of, say, TV commercials. So I think it's really the trend at the moment. And I think smaller businesses even get higher awareness to the product that the bigger businesses are having in terms of launches. So I think that's what's happening at the moment.
Oh, that's great. And from a Chinese perspective, the China market, Chloe, then how are you going to manage this year without the ability to work face to face with your contacts in market? How are you going to replace the relationship building and the trade connections that come from trade fairs and the way you traditionally do business?
I think what we do is we have lots of live streaming event. So during the COVID-19, we actually launched new product. So we have online launch campaign to show people and what is the new product. And we invited all the small and medium KOL, the opinion leader in China. So what we do is we ship the product through general trade in China to be ready. And we cooperate with all the KOL, and at the same time we have the online streaming, so start selling through the link. So right now it's very advanced in China. So for example, we have online streaming. So the button on the left, when they click, this is buy one. So through the COVID-19, we actually sold about 300,000 cleaning soap. So during the whole lockdown. So it's just the behavior is changed. They want to know we can still cooperate with all the people they can abilities to sell. So even though I don't have Shopify, I don't have the link, but as a brand, I can provide you a link, because through your through your live streaming, I can see your traffic. So I can see your ROI. So this is simple. We can simply calculate what is their, how many sales they generate. So during this time, we have a new way to start selling product. So we still have a new product coming. So we are not going to spend any money for offline campaign or anything. So we all online, we invite all the people. So even though you are a student, so right now we cooperate with all the students. So student, you are in Auckland, you can speak Mandarin. So join us, let's do the live streaming together and we can sell the product together. So I predict for the rest of the year or maybe the next 12 months, so the new behavior will be we sell online, but we need to provide the supply chain. So how can the product land into the end user? That's for us the most important things. Once we figure out all the supply chains, so all the every product we can sell online through, don't need to be a very famous KOL. Even the student, they can sell a product.
This is a time of massive change then, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
we need to learn new ways of marketing. We need to adapt new frameworks for regulations. We need to be able to adapt and change much faster than we ever could, while very, very finely treading the line of legality so that we don't get deplatformed. This seems like a double-edged sword. We're on the top of the hour. I just want to capture in a sentence or two from you all just a reason to be cheerful for the sector right now. There's demand, but there's risk. Things are going on. Sam, give us a reason to be cheerful.
Oh, well, I mean, health and wellness is where it's at. I mean, that's, I think that's a fantastic thing to be cheerful about. And New Zealand is well recognised as a quality supplier, and our position in the world in our response to COVID has been is well recognised as well. So, let's take that and go for it.
You're in the right place. Perfect. Julie, what's your reason to be cheerful if we're in the health and wellness space?
Yeah, I would build on that. I think that because New Zealand has got such a strong brand actually before this and certainly through it, that we haven't pivoted our messaging in the US. We've stuck with it, and that has been fine. We've monitored it to make sure that we're not going to get pulled up on anything, but we've just kind of held the line. And I think that that's something to be cheerful about because we don't need to freak out. You know what I mean? So yes, I'm very cheerful about that.
I'm just like, that's a great reason to be cheerful. Nobody here is panicking. Paul, you're not panicking. You're looking very calm. Have you got a reason to be cheerful that's as cheerful as your shirt?
Yeah, well, the shirt first.
That's pretty cheerful.
You got to be happy. I think the thing that we are most cheerful about is we have seen the biggest catalytic change in probably our generation in terms of the drive to online. And that allows us to play in a really exciting space.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining us. Eugene, what's your reason to be cheerful from a sector point of view?
Well, I am really cheerful for brand New Zealand with the purest origin and I guess really what everyone, the consumers are really looking for in terms of ingredients. So I'm really cheerful for that.
We're in the right place. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Chloe, what's your reason to be cheerful with your work into China?
I think the most cheerful thing is consumers still trust New Zealand product, and they are looking for New Zealand products. So we have some dairy products in our company as well, and the demands it's increased. So I think that's the most important thing is as long as we have a reputation in the international stage, everyone will have the demand. So during the COVID-19, I think that people still want our product. So that's something I feel it's quite confident.
Yeah, demand is still there. That's a great reason to be cheerful. Angus, you have the last word.
I'm really just positive and hopeful about the fact that everyone is always still going to need to eat. you know, even COVID, like locking down and stopping things, that's not going to stop our hungry tummies. And so if we can feed the world with, you know, really good for you, premium, natural products that have a unique spin coming from New Zealand, then I think we're going to be absolutely fine and in a good position. And the other thing that's brightened up my day is Paul's shirt, to be honest.
It's an absolute winner. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, one that actually went from optimistic to pessimistic and finally back to optimistic again. There's plainly a huge number of additional complexities and considerations now for our businesses, but if we do what we've been doing so far and work this through as an industry and as a sector, we're going to be in very, very good hands indeed. So I just want to say thank you once more. Thank you to Sam, thank you to Julie, to Chloe, to Eugene, to Paul, and to Angus, and to Hamish, who's not Hamish, but we're back next week, but to Christopher for looking after the buttons and everything else. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we're going deep into the world of manufacturing, different end, and we're going to understand what's been happening there. But in the meantime, if you can stay with us for the after party, please hang on to this call. Otherwise, take good care, be safe, and we'll see you at 10 o'clock next Friday morning. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Andy. So I'm going to just transition everyone into the after party. I'm just going to pause, stop the recording. Through the after party, we'll be